Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf HaYomi. Menachos Daf Tzadi Dalad. We are at the Mishnah on Tzadi Gimel Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. This Mishnah will compare two processes that apply to Karbanes, Smicha and Tenufa. Smicha we discussed yesterday, where the owner places both hands on the head of the carbon, leans on it, and does the video at that time. And then there's Tenufa, which entails waving the carbon back and forth, up and down, in all directions, to exclaim Hashem's oneness and all-encompassing power. Now the Mishnah will compare the two processes. Chomer, there are strictnesses, there is an advantage, basmicha, in smicha over Tenufa, mi bat Tenufa, and vice versa as well. Ubat Tenufa, we find a chumrah in Tenufa that's not found in smicha, mi bat smicha. What's the chumrah that we find in smicha? She'echad meinef l'chol hachaverim, ve'ein echad tzomech l'chol hachaverim. So, in contrast to Tenufa, where if there is a carbon owned by many individuals who are partners in a carbon, so in terms of the Tenufa, which is meant to be done by the owner, one of the owners can exempt everybody. He can do it on behalf of the whole group. She'echad meinef, one will do Tenufa l'chol hachaverim on behalf of the entire club. But when it comes to smicha, that's very personal. Every single owner must do his own personal smicha. As opposed to smicha where we don't allow this. Right? Karbanoi, it has to be your personal smicha. You can't have one fellow on behalf of the group. That's the chumrah that we find in smicha, not found by Tenufa. On the other hand, chomer bat Tenufa, we find a chumrah in Tenufa, not found by smicha, because Tenufa is very broad. It applies to private carbon, public carbon, live animal, the animal parts after shechita, as opposed to smicha, which is only on a live animal. Tenufa applies to a private carbon, public carbon, b'chaim, b'shchutin, alive, and after shechita. It applies to things which have life, meaning animals. As well as to sometimes to things which are not ruach chaim, don't have live spirit within them, which means to say not living beings, like a lechem, like a mincha, right? Organic materials. As opposed to smicha, which is very limited, defined type of process that only applies to karbanis while still alive. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan. So in the Mishnah we learned that there are partners in the carbon. Smicha must perform separately by each individual, as opposed to Tenufa, you can do one on behalf of the entire group. Tana Rabbanan. How do we know this? Karbanai. Right? The pasuk says, "V'samach yodei al reish karbanai." It's personal. Each owner must do it separately. Karbanai teaches us, L'Rabbi is called Bali carbon l'smicha. All the owners of the carbon has to do their own smicha shiachal, because I would think perhaps one can do it on behalf of the group. Well, they do it based on a kavachay, based on logic. Comparing it to Tenufa, Uma Tenufa. Shenas Rabsa b'shchut. Look, even though Tenufa is a broad type of thing, as we said, it applies even after shechita sometimes. Still, nismata b'chayvin. It is limited in terms of chayvin, a group of friends, a group of owners. In that case, you don't have to have everybody involved in the Tenufa. So despite the fact that Tenufa is a far-reaching type of thing, but there's no need for all the owners. Certainly smicha, which is in a way less broad, it's more limited in its scope than Tenufa. Smicha shalei nisrapsa b'shchut, you can't do shechita, smicha on a shechted animal, as we said before. So you see, it's limited to begin with. Wouldn't you agree, wouldn't you think, if you have a group of people, you can get away with just one smicha on behalf of the group? Talmud Laimar comes the pasuk karbanoi. It's your carbon, you got to do it. L'Rabbi is kol bali carbon l'smicha. Every owner has to do his own smicha. Now let's do it on the flip side. So now let's apply this same idea to Tenufa and have all the owners be obligated to do Tenufa based on a kal v'chomer from smicha, mikal v'chomer, uma smicha. Look, even smicha, which is a limited type of thing, It doesn't apply to animals after shechita, only live animals. So despite these limitations, when it comes to partners, when it comes to a group, all have to be involved, as we explained before, based on the pasuk karboni. Certainly by tenufa, which to begin with has a broader scope, applies even to shechted animals. Would you agree that everybody in the group has to do it? Says the Gemara, you're right in logic, but practically, you can't have everybody do tenufa at once. How are you going to do this? Are they all going to do tenufa at once? Inevitably, there's going to be chatzitza issues, because the one doing the tenufa is meant to be touching the material, and if you have 10 people involved, and there's hands all over the place, chatzitza. So the first fellow's hands are going to get in the way of the second pair of hands. And it's going to be a barrier between him and the carbon. So that doesn't work. Okay, so do it in order. Leinif, let the first one do tenufa, followed by the next one, followed by the next, and go back and do it again. Leinif. No, you can't do multiple acts of tenufa. Tenufa, describes it as a single tenufa. Look, tenufa is not numerous tenufas. In which case, when it comes to tenufa, that's why we don't allow more than one. But when it comes to smicha, it doesn't say a smicha. It says v'samach. He should do smicha. He does smicha, and then he does, and he does. There's no contradiction. So tenufa is one process. Tenufa has to be waived. Can't do it together. Chatzitza, separate. Well, that's not tenufa. Inevitably, one will do it on behalf of the group. But smicha, each one has to do it separately. Says the Gemara, okay, so we spoke about the fact that smicha only applies to a live animal, not to a shechted animal. Really? Smicha b'shchut, unless you don't have smicha after shechita, but now listen to this Mishnah Menachos Tamen, which seems to attribute an act of smicha to animal limbs on the way up to the Mizbeach. Now we know the Kohen Gadol has a right to access karbanos any time. He can just walk and say, I'm going to take care of this carbon. Okay, so when he's up to doing that, how would this happen? So he climbed up the ramp to the Mizbeach, and his second in command, his assistant to his right, he gave kevesh. Okay, when he's halfway up the kevesh, the zkan takes hold of him and sort of walks him up, guides him up, helps him get to the top in an honorable way, right? Now he's up to the top and he's ready to do the offering on the Mizbeach. And now we're talking about the Korban Tamid, which has many Kohanim lined up with animal limbs. They're all lined up next to the Kohen Gadol. Instead of them doing it, he will take it from them, put it on the Mizbeach. Okay, so they pass him one at a time, one shipment at a time, so to speak. Rishon, the first of the 11 Kohanim on this queue, passes to him the Haroish, the head and the leg of the animal. Soimeich, we're talking about an animal limb, and the Kohen Gadol does smicha, leans on the parts, and then places them with zirkon, sends them over to the Mizbeach. The same happens the second time around. The second Kohen on the queue passes his portion to the next Kohen in front of him. What does he have? Two hands of the carbon. And the first Kohen now passes it to the Kohen Gadol. And again, he repeats the same process. So Kohen number 2 slips out and leaves the area. And now the third Kohen steps up, passes his material to the first Kohen, and so on and so forth. That's how they would proceed, passing over to the Kohen Gadol all Eivarim, and he would take it, and do smicha, and throw it on the Mizbeach. Now, if he decides, he can do it differently. Who's soymech? He does the smicha, and let somebody else do the final stage. Others can throw the material on the Mizbeach. In any case, we're talking about smicha on limbs. Apparently, smicha is not limited to a live animal. That's not your, standard classic smicha. That's merely an expression of honor in respect of the Kohen Gadol. Rashi says here, it should look different than your regular Haktorah. It should look more elevated, more royal, more prestigious. Hence the act of smicha, but it's not really considered strictly an act of, it's not a standard routine, right? Routine act of smicha, which applies as an obligatory process on a korban, which is only meichayim, not after shchita. Continues the Mishnah with a new parak, which will describe mainly how the breads were prepared, were baked. We're talking about the shtei lechem on shvois, the lechem apanims on a weekly basis. Says the Mishnah, there are differences between the two. Shtei lechem, the two breads offered on shvois, niloishes, they're kneaded, so their dough is processed achas. So first you take one isarin prepared for the first bread, then you take another isarin of flour and do the same for the second bread. They're processed separately. V'nefes achas, likewise, they're baked one at a time in the oven. But lechem apanim, which are the 12 breads placed on the shulchan on Shabbos and stays there for a week until next week, achas. So the lisha part happens the same as the shtei lechem, one at a time. But here we learn from a pasuk, they're baked two at a time as a pair. Now, as we're going to see in the Gemara, the lechem apanim had a unique shape. Hence, they needed a dfus, a form, to keep them, to shape them, to maintain their unique appearance. So he would fashion them in this dfus, in this form, and he would bake them as well in a dfus. And when he removes the bread out of the oven, okay, he doesn't just put it on the table. Again, he puts it in a new form, nice and tfus, so that they should retain their shape, they shouldn't collapse. Now, immediately says, how do we know that you prepare the breads in this fashion, one at a time, bake twice at a time? So this is the pasuk by the lechem apanim. Okay, you meant to bake 12 breads. Shnei esroinim miyachala echos. Each bread is comprised of 2 isarin of flour. The fact that the Torah sort of itemizes bread by bread tells you each one is a separate process. Malamed we learn achas, you prepare them separately. So you prepare the dough separately, and the same with the shtei lechem. Menayin shav shtei lechem. How do you know that the dough of the shtei lechem, the batters, are prepared separately as well? In this pasuk we have yiyah achala echos. The word yiyah, an extra pasuk, extra word, referring to a different process, the shtei lechem, which follow this formula as well. So that's regarding preparing the batter. What about the baking process? How do we know that we bake 2 at a time of lechem apanim? We place them as a pair, 2 at a time. Rashi explains, V'samta refers to the baking process. Simo rishoina, shato isemehem, dainu batanu. The first placement, the first sort of finality you have is the baking process. And that's going to be oisam, 2 at a time. Okay? So, V'samta means you place them, position them, which is the oven, in the oven during the baking process, and that's 2 at a time. Yochol af shtei lechem came. So perhaps 2 at a time applies to shtei lechem as well. Talmud leimar oisam. Only these will be placed, and placed again means placement in something in the oven. That only happens 2 at a time. But when it comes to a different bread, the shtei lechem, that's 1 at a time. Says the Gemara, Hay oisam ha'afikt. You've already used up the word oisam. Right? You used it to teach you that, to learn that the shtei lechem that the lechem apanim are baked a pair at a time. Santa oisam, it's plural. So I could use the same word to teach us that there's a distinction between this one, which is 2 at a time, the shtei lechem is 1 at a time. In Cain, because it's only for this purpose, to teach you that the lechem apanim are baked 2 at a time. It would say v'samtam as one word. Place them. My v'samta is some. Why split into 2 words? Shabbos Mnatarti. That allows us to learn another second halacha as well. To differentiate between a pair at a time of the lechem apanim and one at a time in the baking process of the shtei lechem. Tanur Rabbanan. Another halacha we learn from v'samtam. V'samta oisam means b'tfus. Rashi explains, it could have simply said v'samta. Put them, place them. What's v'samta? It teaches us that they were placed in a special way, into a form, to generate and to maintain their shapes. V'samta isam batfus. And in fact, there were 3 of these forms, shloisha defusenheim. First one was for when it was in its dough form. Nois no lutfus. He places the dough in a dfus, but ani batzak, while it's still dough, and that allows you to form it. Ukum dfus hayevila bataner. Once you've done that, and you're ready to place it in the oven, it was another, I assume, metal form in the oven, in which it would bake. And when he removes the baked bread from the oven, he can't just put it anywhere; it's going to collapse. Again, he had a special third form for that. It shouldn't get ruined, it shouldn't collapse. Ask the Gemara, why do we need a new tfus post-baking? Just use the same one that was used before the baking. Well, how did the tfus come up? Put into the previous one. What do we need? A third one. Says the Gemara. You know why? Because now it's bloated. Now the bread is developed. It's baked. It's expanded. Looks different than when it was in its dough form. Given the afila, once you bake it, nafcha, it bloats. So the third tfus had to be bigger in size to accommodate the baked bread. The Mefarshim add that they couldn't use the second one, the one that was used for baking. That was black already. It wasn't appropriate for storage of lechem apanim. Okay, so in a nutshell, we learned 3 halachos from the v'samtam word. V'samta oisam. Right? One is oisam, that you bake it 2 at a time. In fact, that it used oisam instead of just v'samtam teaches us that only this one is 2 at a time, but the shtei alechem is 1 at a time. And the choice of word of using v'samta as opposed to v'nasata teaches they meant to use these forms. Itmar. So what exactly did lechem apanim look like? Lechem apanim. Ketzad oisin oisei. How would they form it? What shape did it have? Return Talmud Bavli. Chanina Amar Kiminteva Prutza. It was like a box. Prutza, open on 2 sides. So if you take a look at the Rashi, the top figure looks like a U. That describes this shita. It was boxy, it was symmetrical. So it's like a box, but instead of having all 4 sides closed, 2 sides were open. Right? So it had a bottom, and then it had 2 walls. So it looked like a U. Right? Rabbi Yechon Kimin Kedes. He said it looked like a dancing boat, like a canoe. Right? A canoe is long and narrow. Right? So instead of it being symmetrical and boxy, it was more round, long and narrow. Okay? So it was like a V in the middle, and then the front, it would sort of angle up and sharpen to a point, and the same on the back. Look at a canoe. Rashi says rekedes means because it looks like it's shimir rekedes v'lechas maher. It like dances, it slides, it glides across the water quickly. Also that the front and back edges like slope upward, right? So they look like they're above the water. In any case, it was either boxy or like a canoe. Says the Gemara. Let's see how this fits with the whole shulchan configuration. So yeah, if it was like a box, you could understand where they placed the spoons with the incense, which were a required accompaniment for every set of lechem apanim. Hainu dahavu yasri bazichen. So you place the cups, the spoons, up on top. So you have a set of breads, and up on top you put the bazichen, and since the breads are flat, right? So you put it on the flat area. Great, so it sits there, it's supported properly. But if it's like a canoe, where did you, everything's on an angle. Where would you place the spoons? You'd somehow prepare, a little flat spot in the bread for placement of the spoons. So although the rest of it was angled and curvy, but there was a little flat spot for the bezich. Okay, So we addressed that. Next question. Certainly according to the Shita that says that it was boxed. We understand where the poles, the sticks, the supporting poles would sit. We know from the Torah that the Shulchan had these kanim. So basically, if you imagine the Shulchan, which was a long and narrow rectangle, right? Right? So it's going like this, right? Long and narrow. And you have, we're going to see later, snifim, these sort of support beams coming along the side, riding all the way up to the top of the shulchan, alongside the breads. And now the breads are situated on the shulchan itself, from snif to snif, right? From support to support. And across we have these kanim, these sticks, these poles, right? So, again, you have the shulchan surface on which we have the bread. Now, if the bread was boxy, right? So it's sitting on the flat surface of the shulchan, right? And across the top, you have the kanim resting on the breads. 3 kanim on which there was another set of bread, another bread, and then above that you had more kanim, another bread, etc., till the top. So you have the kanim properly supported, sitting on a flat surface, on a box, on those breads. But that only seems to make sense if the surface was flat, such as if you hold out the breads were like a box. So you have a place to support the kanim from side to side across the bread. But if you hold that, it was like a little boat. In which case, if you picture the breads going like this, right? So, the middle is wide, but then it sort of comes together as a point. So the kanim, which have to go across that and sit on the bread. So yeah, across the middle makes sense, because it's wide and supportive. But across the edge there, there's not much place to support itself. It's just a little teeny corner there of material. Right, so those poles are running across the breads, which are meant to support the bread above it. Where they sit, the answer is he added a little dough at the edge there. When they were baking it, they added a little extra support there to support those kanim. Mursha, they made these little corners, extra add-ons of dough, that we'd make for those breads to support the kanim. Okay. Solved. Next question. Mishlam on the Omar means tevat prutza. So if you hold it was like a box, snif in the lechem. So that would work well with the snifin, as we explained. There were those posts running along the shulchan on either side of the breads. So if you have symmetrical boxy breads, right? So the sides are vertical, right? Straight up. So they're sitting next to the snifim. They're supporting each other. Great. So we have the boards on the sides that are being samchile, that are supporting, holding in containing the lechem, the bread, because they're configured accordingly. But if they're boats, they're angled and curved. So imagine having this canoe-shaped bread, right? And you have those straight supports flanking on either side. These are straight and these are angled. How do they connect? How do they support each other? How would the snifin on the side support the lechem? The answer is the agil mi agil. He would add a curvature, configure the snifin in accordance with the shape of the bread. So instead of just going flat, straight up, they would sort of curve at every level. They'd curve alongside the bread. There were 6 levels of bread, right? And there would be an extra curvature coming out of the snifin, a round curvature, to sort of hold the bread in place. Da'aglu mi agal, Rashi says, like a half circle, shakaran circula. There you go, circle. Okay, problem solved. Next question. Now, if you go with the boat angle, that explains why we even need those supports. Otherwise, the bread's toppling all over the place, because there isn't really a proper bottom surface for it to sit on. It's sort of precariously, being balanced between the two snifin. But if you hold that it's a box, it's sitting comfortably. properly supported. Why do you have to hold it on the side? It's not going anywhere. Snif and those snif and lamali, what's the point? The answer is agav yikru lechem, because of the weight. Remember, you're piling them up. Tolach, it would just like smother it and fall apart and collapse. It would break without proper support on either side to keep it in shape and in place. Next question. Now, if you go with the opinion that it's like a sfina, in which case the bottom bread sitting on the actual surface of the shulchan was very narrow at the point where it meets the shulchan. So there's plenty of space on either side to stick in the snifin, which are those supports which ride up to the top. So the snifin now based on the shulchan, they're placed on the shulchan alongside the bottom layer of the bread, which leaves a lot of space leaves for a lot of space because it only has one little point touching the table. So there's a lot of surface area to place the snifin. Again, Bishlam and Omar means sfina rekedes. Snifin are really, literally, al gav shulchan on the bread, munach, sitting on the bread. But if the breads were configured like a box, so it was flat like a U, and it would cover the whole surface of the shulchan from side to side, then come up, folded on either side, that leaves no room on the actual shulchan surface to place the supports. Snif and those supports, where would he place them? He placed them on the floor below. So it was sitting down on the floor, and then they would ride all the way up alongside the shulchan, alongside the breads, to keep them supported. So it's like a question mark. Manachlu, do you mean to say they were placed on the floor? Yes, incorrect. Right on. Yep. The Amar Rabbi Abba Mammal Divra Omer, according to the opinion that Kimin Sfina Rekedes, that the lechem was like a sfina, then Snifin Agal B'Shulchan Munachan. The Snifin had plenty of place on the Shulchan itself, alongside the breads. But Lo Divra Omer Kimin Teva Prutza, but if you hold it as like a box, there was no space on the actual top surface of the shulchan. Rather, the snifin, those supports, which ran alongside the breads, al gam b'karka munachan, began all the way down on the floor and made their way up. Now, Kaman Az Lahadam Rav Yehuda, there is a statement from Rav Yehuda, and we'd like to know whose opinion is reflected in this description. He says like this: in terms of the interaction between the breads and the snifin, it was sort of a two-way street. It was interrelated. They would support each other. The bread supports the snifin, and the snifin support the breads. Halechem ma'amid es ha-snifin, v'ha-snifin ma'amid, and they hold up the bread as halechem. How does that work? That only works with the boat approach. Kiman da'amar kimin sfina rekedes, v'elak sfina rekedes, and those snifin were configured to match the contours of the bread with those half circles and angles, so they're all sort of wrapped around each other, right? The half circle keeps the bread in shape, and the bread, which is sitting on the half circle, keeps the half circle in place. So it's sort of circled and contained around each other, as opposed to the one that holds its teva, which is a plain square. So the breads are not holding the snifin; they're not sort of interplaying with each other in terms of their design. Maybe we have a kasha up on Tzadi Amid Aleph. On Rabbi Yechon, who says that the breads were like a sfina rekedes, we have a brisa which seems to describe it as a box. There was this form, right? This baking form in the oven itself, like a kavera, so it was perforated like a honeycomb to allow the heat to get through and properly bake the bread. And listen to the way the brisa describes it. What shape did it have? It appears to mean tavel mirabas, like a square tray. Apparently it was square, not round. Ema. We have to learn the brisa like this. Explain it like this. The mouth, the opening of the form was square. Some explain because, like we said before, even if we hold that it was like a canoe, but at the edges we have to sort of square it out a little bit to allow for supporting the kanim. So the top was squarish, but the actual form on bottom was round and pointy, and like we said before. Tanikum Adama Kimin Sfina Rekedes actually is a brisa which supports the ship approach, the sanya. Here goes the brisa. Arbo snifin shozava yushams. The brisa describes the snifin, the supports, which ran which flanked the shulchan on either side, and there were 4 in total, right? Because on the shulchan, which was a rectangle, we had 2 sets of breads, 2 piles. Each set requiring 2 snifen, 1 on either side, so a total of 4 snifen, made of gold. Arba snifen shel zav hoyisham, mifutzal miroshen min the kronen, hayu. And there were several ways to understand this, but there was some sort of branching out. Like in the kronen, hayu, like sometimes you go out and you see these wild growing bamboos, right? Like a cluster of bamboos, of reeds, and they come out like a cluster and they sort of branch out. So the snifen had that appearance. They branched out. Whether we're talking about on top, how they branched out, creating separate channels, each one holding 1 kana. Remember there were 3 kanim, 3 of these poles going across bridging across the lechem. So the snifen would sort of branch into 3. Each one would support a kana going across to the other side, the other snif. Or it means that there was sort of like protrusions facing the breads, which were little sort of semicircle supports to hold those kana which ran across the breads. Either way, the point was shesamchen when salechem, which were used to support the breads. And what did the bread look like? Shudaim looks like kimin sfina rekadas. There you go, like a dancing boat. That's a right to this sheet. Okay, let's do a recap. We had the comparison between Tnufa and Smicha. Smicha is only Mechaim, but has to be done by all members. Tnufa is sometimes even after Shchita, and can be done by one member of the group on behalf of the group. We spoke about a Smicha the Kohen Gadol does, but it's not the standard Smicha. That's only Mishum Kohen the Kohen Gadol. We spoke about how they processed the batter of the Shtei Alechem and Lechem Aponim, how they baked them, and the shaping of the Lechem Aponim. All the best to you, and Atzlach.